Welcome to the Wellbeing Room. Today, I am delighted to have with us Marlo Fisken. Marlo is joining us from the United States, and she has been a mover all of her life, and she continues to explore movement and dance in some unusual, perhaps, and innovative ways, which I find very interesting. I came across Marlo's work in 2016 when I was Googling dance classes online and was instantly intrigued by her offerings in floor flow and the sensuality, confidence, and playfulness that she exuded. On her website bio, Marlo states she is probably most known as a pole dance innovator, having started experimenting with pole well before there were mainstream competitions. She goes on to say that working with the pole confirmed her knack for circular movement and that she loves bringing lightheartedness and spark to activities people tend to take, in brackets, very seriously. Her business, Flow Movement, was born out of her desire to share the benefits of fluid, creative, dance based movement with the world. The Flow Movement approach invites all people to move with imagination, sensuality, and sensitivity, and to become more comfortable being on and playing with the floor. This is something that I've enjoyed experimenting with, thanks to the guidance of some of Marlo's online tutorials and courses. On Marlo's Instagram profile, she labels herself as a wiggle advocate and has used the terms movement positivity and constructive misbehavior to describe her unique and playful approach to movement. I'm really looking forward to exploring these concepts with her in our chat today. Welcome, Marlo.
Hello. Thank you. I haven't heard that read in so long. I'm glad it still resonates. Yeah.
Well, if there's anything you'd like to add, please feel
Yeah, no, that
free.
was great. I'm still on board with all of that. Great.
Great, excellent. All right. So I'm just going to dive right in. There's no point beating around the bush, as they say. So, firstly, as someone who's been moving for so long, because this has been a lifelong practice for you, how do you maintain your love and connection with your movement practice? So, what keeps you showing up day after day?
A primary motivator is always music. That even if I'm not sure about moving and now today, if I hear music, and particularly if I hear something I haven't heard before with a rhythm that drives or some rolling bass line, it is like hands moving me forwards and just starting to move my body. And I attribute growing up in dance to that. So it's sort of like beautiful to have a coach in music that so clearly says it's time to get up and go. But also the awareness of the infinite possibilities within even very simple or foundational things. So, pick your position, hands and knees on the floor or sitting. I am fascinated by the infinite variations within something as simple as like shifting from side to side or changing the shape of your spine. And from playing with those things, I find class content and I love to share and to teach. So the cycle of finding a new way to experience or language movement and sharing it with others keeps me coming back.
Yeah, excellent. So you have a daily practice, I assume. Do you want to share a bit about what that looks like?
It's also very location dependent because I'm frequently traveling to different places. So, first consideration is what's available. When I'm home in Virginia Beach, Virginia, I go to a gym 3 times a week and do some pretty classic high effort strength training, but always with a warm up process that involves put on music, wiggle and figure out how to get myself feeling warm, hydrated, excited. So it's a more intuitive or improvisational process. I know what body tissues I need to prepare or warm up, but I am always following the moment rather than a plan until it comes time to lift weights. So I do that several times a week. And then I also practice dancing, often not in the ideal circumstances. I'm dancing in a corner of a bedroom at my mom's house, in the kitchen, sometimes out in the woods, because that's what I have available. But I need that. That's nourishing to me. And those are the primary things here. And maybe dancing isn't always the right word because it suggests like performing. I'm putting on music and moving to it and challenging myself to keep going and to have a good time, challenging myself to have a good time, which sometimes when you say that I'm dancing, there's an expectation around what it should look like, that can make it hard to then have a good time for a lot of people. So the most important thing is that I am moving and that I am enjoying myself through whatever it is that I've chosen to do.
Because you've been moving for such a long time, it's just second nature for you. So I guess for someone, like myself who hasn't got that dance background, or, some of my students who perhaps, just come to a class once a week, um, I want to inspire in people to move more regularly, more often, more frequently, and I love that idea of, you just, the music comes on and you just feel, into your body, and challenge yourself with some different ideas of how to move. For someone who's maybe just starting, or, they don't have that regular, I guess, practice, do you have any thoughts or suggestions about how to, I guess, overcome the mental hurdle that someone might have about doing that, of just putting some music on and moving around? How could they then integrate a more regular movement practice into their life? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think first there's even getting started before having an assignment for what you do. And when it comes to recognizing the need for movement, that's also a skill that we have to develop. I think that people are pretty well attuned to what hunger feels like, or when they're hungry, but there are also these movement hunger signals that we might sometimes misinterpret. For example, sometimes for me, fatigue we most often associate with, like, oh, I need to rest, but it's actually a sign for me that I need to go for a walk, and I feel, oh, like completely, rejuvenated. That's not to say that rest isn't important, of course it is, but I know that that's one of those movement hunger signals for me, the sort of slump, or a feeling of stiffness, of creakiness, of something like uh not feeling like it moves easily. Those are all sort of movement hunger signals that I know that what it requires is usually some gentle, very repetitious movements that encourages movement in slight variety of ways, which brings me to, where do you get started? And I'll speak about this assuming that somebody would be moving to music, although that's not necessary. But think of something that's very easy for you that you already do daily. I'll take walking, for example. If you are a person that walks, put on music and find a song that has a rhythm that you could walk to. And just walk to the beat. If you start to feel like you want to be a little bit more creative with your steps, maybe walking a little bit more in a line, or crossing one foot in front of the other, but your only assignment is to stay walking to the beat and have a whole song of that. Because what you'll start to notice is that there are these little variations in the way that you're moving. Maybe you notice that you're not moving something. Perhaps your shoulders are locked, and then you realize you could start to move your shoulders, or the shape that your hands are in as you walk might be changing, and by spreading your fingers or doing something. Now, if you're hearing that and thinking, there's no way I'm going to walk around my neighborhood like that, this could be pretty subtle. So being more creative in movement and finding more enjoyment, pleasure in movement doesn't have to be something that would grab people's attention as something that really stands out of the ordinary. I do that too, and I advocate for that. Of course, like if you see a tree, climb it. I will cheer you on, hop on and off the curb. But I think a tragic assumption that we have is that one needs dance training to move more creatively or intuitively, or that it requires some skill set other than what you have right now. I sometimes work with people that are in their 70s and 80s, and we will get in one position and enjoy ourselves for a whole song, like elbow swinging, and I love it too, because in the simplicity, it relieves the expectations that we should be doing something other than what we're doing, which for people, regardless of skill level, is a gateway to flow state of movement, which is integral to really enjoying yourself and to making it more of a habit. If we don't know how to get lost in the enjoyment of what we're doing, we're much less likely to do it regularly. So that's something I'm particularly interested in, is what are some of the gateways to helping people drop into something where they forget about anything other than what they're doing for at least a few moments at a time.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for explaining that. That was perfect.
You're
So good. So
welcome.
excellent. Yeah, and I noticed that too because I've been teaching this exploratory movement workshop a few times over the last year. And people come and they're generally a bit apprehensive about what they're about to do. They're like, oh, I don't really dance, or, definitely not in public. And it's not really about dancing as such. It's more just about moving. And we will start with walking or even just, stepping on the spot. And yeah, and I think yeah, people have this feeling that they can't express themselves in public in a
Yeah.
physical way. But I like how you said, just subtle movements can be, easy to incorporate. What I love about creating space for people is that, we can, we build up to things like, a few times I've brought in props like hoops and ropes and scarves and things. And people love just like moving with a scarf or moving with a hoop and just, going back to their younger self perhaps and
Yeah.
exploring what that feels like. And then they do get into that sort of flow state where it doesn't really matter anymore. They're just enjoying themselves. And there's always lots of laughter and fun. And I figure that's probably what a lot of your workshops are like too.
Yeah, props. I love that you bring that up because that's another really powerful way for us to, uh, interestingly, find more connection to what we're doing by paying attention to something other than ourselves. So by watching how you're manipulating an object, like if I had a ball and I was rolling it side to side on the floor, if you said scarf, I could imagine, you're maybe throwing them and catching them, some sort of juggling, uh, something to climb or interact with. It allows you to pay attention to how that thing is moving, which in order to move that thing better, you start to move better. And it could be, again, a very helpful way to start to move with more variety. Uh, and then that can graduate to getting rid of the object that you've been working with, but continuing to move as if you were moving that object. So if you play catch with somebody, play catch, then get rid of the ball and just do it with the air. and then you start to see that, yeah, that transition to moving more creatively, a lot of it is mimicking everyday motions in a slightly different context. But that's why starting with the things that are familiar, or through interacting with an object or a surface, a wall, can you keep your hands connected to the wall as you go up and down? So finding a challenges with contact are really some of my favorite ways to get people to explore
Yeah.
more and
And you
find
do
new
a lot,
pathways.
you do a lot of floor work as well. So that idea of connecting with the floor and pushing and
Yeah.
pulling and sliding and all that kind of stuff. I love that. So yeah.
Yeah. They're everywhere.
That's
The
right.
floor. It's good to know how to use it. Yeah.
That's right. Very useful tool. Excellent. So what I'd like to get your thoughts on is what do you think is the reason or reasons people feel uncomfortable about moving their bodies? Where do you think
Mhm.
that comes from?
Well, that's a big question. And I think it's important to first just relieve everyone, ourselves, of feeling personally responsible for the discomfort. Because sometimes people think I'm so in my head, or this is so awkward for me, and feel really alone in that. But that was part of a culture that you grew up in and that you didn't create. And from the way that if you didn't have these sorts of movement from childhood and weren't supported in them, of course it's going to be uncomfortable. A lot of the ways that someone might advance in their career is specifically by changing the way that they move and changing the way that they move in space, and what you wear to somewhat restrict your body movement so that you could be perceived as professional. These things all go together into what we're going to be comfortable with. But all that to say that it is changeable. Just because it's uncomfortable, or it wasn't something you grew up with, it doesn't mean that it has to stay that way. um but I do think that the people that you're around have a huge impact on the choices that you'll make for your movement, for your well-being. And um, now that could be quite a challenge. But I also think that the physical environment that you're in is constantly cueing you subconsciously to make choices about movement. So, for example, if you have a room and it's full of comfy couches, you're going to go and you're going to lay on the comfy couch. If you have a room and it has yoga balls and something to kind of grab onto and hang from, and sure, something comfortable to sit on, but you have that mix of objects, you're probably going to engage with that space differently. And that goes for anyone that's in the space. So we're not used to really dynamic environments that encourage movement unless you are going to a jungle gym. The gym has really specific sort of codes of conduct built into it around what is this thing and what is an approved way to use it, you know. And then in a dance studio, there's maybe no equipment and you just have this open space, which could also be intimidating. So if we create environments that could remind us and encourage us to move with a bit more variety, things to have by your feet while you're doing the dishes, and roll your feet on it, um, you'll start to find that there's more movement in your life, but
Mm,
you've not been cued to do it
mm,
socially
yeah.
through like the social systems, and then also through the physical spaces that
Yeah.
we've been a part of. So
Mm, yeah. And I thank you for sharing that. That's really important. I just want to add on some things, observations that I've also had about movement and in spaces. Like, for instance, so I have a dog now. I've had a dog for 3 years. And sometimes I feel like I'm walking my dog out in a public space at the Oval or something. And, I might see a tree or I might see a bench or I might see, a thing of concrete. And, I want to go and do something with that, balance or jump or hang or swing. And I feel because I've got the dog, like, that's if I let the dogs in, there's that extra responsibility. And I think just that idea of, having responsibilities weighing on us can prevent us from moving, like children, for instance. You want to, I mean, I always get when my daughter was young, I'd go to the playground, I'd take her to the playground, and I would actually go and play with her on the equipment. I just the thought of sitting there just watching her would just drive me insane. So I'm like, oh, let's go play together. We might do different things, or I'll go down the slide, she'll go down the slide, that kind of thing. So I always was, I was probably the only parent or carer there that would actually go on the equipment with my child. And so I think we have these responsibilities or expectations in our certain roles that we take our children to the playground, but we sit there and watch them, or we sit there and have our coffee whilst we talk to the other mums or dads there. And and like, for instance, out walking a dog, I sometimes feel that restriction of I really like to do this movement, but I know if I go swing on that thing, he's probably going to bark at me, or he might go chase someone else. So there's things pulling me back, um, to prevent me, or and maybe that's more just inside my head, rather than what if I just did that? Maybe it's not so bad. Hmm.
yeah, well, I agree with you. We sometimes we notice. I think, well, do you notice that there is an opportunity, and then also notice that we're not taking it is a really helpful window there. And that I love that you said, what if? What if next time you're with the dog, you say, I'm going to try to balance on this thing anyway while my dog's running in circles. It's We might normally interpret it as annoying or inconvenient, but you might also be able to, for you or for anyone, frame it as like, look at this interesting challenge that I'm finding myself in, which sometimes I have to do as I'm fulfilling various caretaker duties and doing, cleaning or other people's stuff that's not mine, which on one layer, there might be some aggravation there that I'm doing it and I have to go, well, let's look at the body movement that's involved in this, and it immediately changes my experience. So
Yeah.
like, oh, look, there's stuff in the way. I get to lift my knees up so high to step over it, you know.
Excellent. Yeah, 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 that's right. How would you encourage someone who wants to move but feels apprehensive or is concerned about the consequences of embarrassing themselves in public?
Hmm. I am a person who does things in public that many people would they couldn't be paid enough to try sometimes. Or they need to be paid a lot to try. Um, and it is not to be seen. And in fact, I also don't want people looking at me, but I also know that I need to move in a pretty big variety of ways, and to really like move energy, to move myself in order to feel okay, in order to feel healthy and to feel like I'm thriving. And I'm very frequently impressed in how little anyone cares. So the assumption is often, ah, I don't want to catch people's attention, but it frequently is somebody might just kind of look and move on. They really people are not paying anywhere near as much attention to us as we think they are. And that can be a hard thing to believe when you're having the experience of concern about what someone else is looking. But that's what chances are, that they really are not looking or going to look or going to care or have a thought any more than we think they are. And I through being a person who observes behavior on the internet, often see a lot more judgment towards people when they're doing quite normal things, like there's that people are assessing how someone is running or moving or what they're wearing. And so the potential for that is happening all the time. If you are a body who goes outside and moves and wears clothes, you are subject to it. and
Mm.
and and in fact, you have a chance of helping other people feel like they have permission to break free because they see you. And for me, that's a tremendous motivator. That if I am in a store in a line and I'm the one in kind of a wide lunge shifting side to side, I do not care if someone thinks that's weird because I'm thriving. But I also might be giving someone permission, and I see it happen all the time. Someone says, "Oh, that looks like it feels good." I'm like, "Yeah, you should try it." And so you're going to have a positive effect on people by breaking the cycle and this agreement that we should be inhibited and fearful of moving our bodies outside of a really narrow scope of activity. So that that's that motivates me, and other people that I work with or that watch some of the things I post often reflect back to me. I see you moving freely. I go do it. I feel better. My kids are seeing me. Other people are seeing me. And it's simple stuff, just swinging your arms in wild directions because it feels like a beautiful dynamic stretch. And it's really far more of a positive trickle down effect than staying concerned about how you look, you know?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is inspiring, and yeah, and it's also the opportunity to make someone else smile, and smiling makes people feel good. They see you doing
Yeah.
something unusual, and we don't do it often enough. Yeah, and I love that idea of giving other people permission, because
Mhm.
when they see someone doing something that's maybe a bit out of the norm, whilst they're waiting in a queue, or like that. That gives them permission to maybe, oh yeah, I could do that, or maybe I won't do it right here, but maybe I'll, when I leave or when
Mhm.
I'm at home, I'll give that a try, or see how that feels in my own space. So yeah, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
All right, so I'm going to change tack a little bit, but you have a long history with pole, and that's probably something that you're well known for. You teach a lot of workshops and things, do lots of tutorials for people learning pole. My daughter, she's 15. She's actually just started this year doing pole, and I guess my question for you from her would be, what advice would you give to someone like her who's just starting out on this journey into pole?
Yeah. Well, I think just starting at 15 is definitely different than just starting in your 30s and beyond, because of the phase of bodily capacity that you are presented with. Um, but I think my advice for pole is my advice for nearly any movement pursuit is that there are established ways of doing a thing, whether it is pole or circus or a dance style, that some people will tell you, do this thing in this way. But innovation comes from exploration, and that is to play, and know that from on the other side of play is probably your own enjoyment, likely the development of your own style, and getting to know your own capacities. When people begin an activity that tends to be pretty demanding and they're only following instructions from other people, the likelihood of them hurting themselves is actually pretty high, because they're maybe being exposed to things on like the internet, or these skills that are a little bit too far above their current capacity, and they tend to take a leap, skipping to I want to be able to do this thing, and we're holding the idea of what we want and we're rushing towards it. And I see it happen all the time. But when people are more in true play rather than the sort of ego oriented, I need to get that skill right away, you see a wider development of skill set and endurance, and those some of those things that get put on the back burner when you're going to learn specific moves. Or so being able to connect what you learn rather than just trying to accumulate as many different skills as possible, which I call skill hoarding. You can do all these different things, but not connect them in a way that feels really natural and fluid, or with a lot of variety. So, yeah, those are a couple thoughts. I could talk for a long time about that, but yeah, what does that bring up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't go to the class to watch what they do, but I see at the end, some of the moves that she's learning, which is great because my daughter's never really had an interest in other sports up until this point in time. Yeah. She dabbled in ballet for half a year at one point, and a bit of some martial arts as well, but only for a short period. So I'm really excited that she's getting into this movement practice. It is very strong, and she always comes away with like bruises and
Yeah.
things and she like wears them as badges of honor, really, which is great. I guess as a parent, my concern is that that she's warming up correctly, that she's going to hit her head, or twist something, and hurt herself, and create some damage that way. But I love what you said about and I was watching one of your videos yesterday preparing for this, but just seeing how you explore, a particular move on the pole, for instance. And, you pointed out some of the, I guess, the mistakes that people might make, or the alignment of their body. I think being really aware of where different parts of your body are in space is really important. Yeah. So that awareness of where the hands are, where the shoulders are, where the hips are, which way you're facing, if you're facing to the pole, away from the pole, and how that affects your movement around the pole. So I love that you talk about this idea of play and exploration in the process. And I think that's what they do in a certain extent in the classes that she goes to. But yeah, I think that's worth highlighting for lots of things, even yoga, having taught yoga for a long time. I notice how people move, or have restrictive movements in certain ways, and try to look at different ways of getting there. So the yoga I do is a more therapeutic style of yoga, so we actually can do a lot of preparatory exercises before we actually even get to the full asana. Like there's lots of work along the way to sort of release the tension, build the strength, feel into the body. And so that when we get to, say, trikonasana, triangle pose, there's length in the side of the body, the arm can stretch, the legs are strong and rounded, and hips in the right spot. So I love that exploration. I think it is about exploration. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, it's exciting that, like I said, she's starting at a time where you have a window to develop physical capacities that if you build them now, it's so much easier to retain later in life. So to learn a pull-up at 15 is much easier than doing one for the first time in your 40s.
Yes.
which is possible, you know, and I have supported people on that journey, but that's great that you have she's found something that she's wants to go do. Then
Mm,
that's I'm thrilled for whatever that thing is, that if we find something that, you know, that there's a spark there of interest and extra points if it also gets you climbing things.
yeah.
That's yeah.
I just want to touch on something you just mentioned there, like the whole idea of, being able to do a pull up when you're 15 compared to when you're 40.
What do we do with that? What do we do if you didn't start young?
Well,
Yeah.
that's right. I mean, I guess for you, you've got that advantage of you've been having trained all your life. You've got that beautiful, amazing strength and physicality that you just continue to have, throughout your life. And it's something you continue to cultivate. Whereas someone, for instance, who, wants to be healthy as they age and then, is just realizing in their 40s that, oh dear, I haven't been looking after myself. I've got to do something. And there's, maybe this big mindset hurdle they have to overcome, plus the body,
Mm-hmm.
readjustment they have to overcome. And, maybe they think, oh, I'm just not coordinated. Do you want to just sort of talk about that?
Sure. Well, that if you are alive, you have the capacity for change. And there might be some very fringe examples of where that doesn't apply, but probably if you're listening to this podcast, you are very, very capable of some significant change. Even an older adult, several years from the end of their life, can get stronger. And the good news is that when you first start an activity, you're going to see the most impressive gains, the most rapid transformation that you will at any point of your engagement with an activity. So, somebody who's been doing something their whole life that, had taken an early start to something that's like this, like little up, little down, it's actually really hard at high levels of performance to make like a 1% difference in a technique. Is actually considered like a really significant change for elite athletes to up level their strength by a whole percent is considered like a big change. And if you're just starting something, you can make so much progress in, let's say, 6 months of consistent, appropriately leveled work. And I think that's really beautiful too, because it's particularly motivating when we see the change. Now, many people won't make it past 2 weeks because not enough change has happened. And so if you're not used to engaging with the long game of physical movement to see markable changes in your mobility and your strength, those two things take time. Coordination, quality of movement, how you feel, those things you can make a much faster change with. That's, more nervous system related. But to see a significant change in the form of your body, your strength, your mobility, it takes a while for those changes to happen. So most people don't stick around with it long enough to really get to see that it is happening, because it is happening from when you start. And so for people that don't have that history, they often misinterpret and underestimate how long it will require that they're engaged with it. And so they don't get to watch it unfold. But for those who do stick around, it's incredible and beautiful thing. I have students of 40s, 50s, 60s that have learned to do pull-ups and handstands and cartwheels and bring themselves to tears because they feel like they're dancing. I actually had a student all last week before, 84 years old, and she took 4 days of workshops with me. Now, she's totally exceptional in how she is and how she moves, but it was over 4 days. I got to see her through doing quite a bit of improvisation and free movement, her get more and more comfortable getting into this more loopy sort of fluid movement. And she's 84 years old, and to see her move in it like a different person after just a couple of days of workshops is a testament to the fact that anybody can and change how they move, but you have to stick with it long enough to watch it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. And it is a lifelong journey, isn't it? You know, you could give up, like you say, after 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years, but once that happens, it's not going to stay with you. You have to keep on
Yeah.
at it, you know, and especially if you want to do that continuously for the, you know, if you want to maintain a certain level for the remainder of your life, you know, especially as women going through perimenopause and menopause, there's a lot of muscle loss that happens quite quickly if we don't keep it moving and keep
Yeah.
working. But it's not to say that you can't get that back once if you start again. And I think that's important for people to understand is that, you know, you may not have it now, you may have had it in the past and it's deteriorated, but you can always get it back as long as you keep moving. I just did want to ask you, you know, we have in common caring for an elder parent. And I guess I'm curious how you've adjusted and adapted your movement practice to make room for this role. And you did touch on that just before with the cleaning example. But how does movement also help you in dealing with those difficult emotions or releasing tension from time spent caring? I know for me, you know, I just wrote to my newsletter about resentment and guilt and shame and
Mm.
all those things that
Hmm.
come up for me. But yeah, I'm just curious, you know, how has movement helped you, I guess, release or express or let go of those feelings?
Um, well, I'm very fortunate to be outside of here is a beach and there is marsh trails. And I know that if I didn't have access to those surroundings, that my this role would be even harder because just going outside and being in these environments with beautiful seabirds and marsh and maybe I'm just walking, maybe I'm running, maybe I've paused and I'm moving to music. But it is such a powerful agent in state change to that and to to be situated in the place that I'm in. Um, but it's been a big shift for me because I used to be a career performer, mover. So that would mean hours a day of my own uninterrupted training. That my time was my time. And I still get that at some periods of the day, but often I make a plan and it has to shift because my mom needs something. And I just have to be okay with things, plans changing rather than getting caught in a cycle of frustration about my movement life not being what I hoped it would be. I would love to be moving far more than I am, but I run a business. I'm my mom's caretaker, and then that takes up most of my time available, and I don't get to spend sort of long leisurely training sessions that made up a lot of my life. And for example, in high school, I went to a high school for the arts and would dance 4 to 8 hours a day throughout high school. And then through much of my adult life was, that was my primary job was to be excellent at what I do and to create my classes. Um, so that means that when I do have time to move, I really need to cherish it because it is special. So yes, to recognize the preciousness of movement time, to not to not allow myself to waste my own time doing kind of uh, half committed training or to be distracted while I'm training. That is a disservice to myself and to how I could show up for anybody else or for my mother later on. So the more fully I can commit and I can enjoy my movement practice, that's the restoration. I know for many people, when they think self care, they tend to think more rest. But for me, the self care is carrying around it's the color might not show up so well. This color changing speaker with me, having my music up, and keeping this sort of bouncing rhythmic aliveness in me, even in the middle of a bunch of bleh. That's like really how one of the ways I take care of myself and um, feel very powered by music as the opening question for this. But that's a big part of it. And yeah, I think that's being outside, enjoying the movement that I have, and uh, high high effort things, especially when interpersonal dynamics get particularly challenging, I need exertion. So, something that really puts me out of breath, or like lifting heavy, doing something really dynamic, jumpy, acrobatic. You need that output, that level of output, in order to recalibrate. And sometimes that's is a big factor for people in burnout. The book Burnout, in fact, that was one of the main conclusions from the book, from the Nagoski sisters, was that one of the main reasons that people are dealing with burnout is that they're not discharging the day-to-day stress accumulation. Like, they might be active, but they're not getting to a high enough level of I would call it, like, getting yourself stimulated enough, hot enough to really metabolize the low simmering or sometimes higher simmering stress that we go through throughout the day. So I teach classes and sometimes realize that people come to them that they're not used to moving even short periods of time at a high intensity. And on the other side of what is probably uncomfortable, even just to swing your arms as fast as you can for 1 minute, it's going to be probably somewhat uncomfortable. On the other side of that is a bit of euphoria.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so need that. People tell me they want to be more mobile, so they start stretching, and I'm like, actually, let's get your heart rate up, let's get you sweating, because your body will then allow you,
Mm.
that will start to, like, gift you the movement, or gift you the ease, gift you the flow, because of that first wave. You just
Yeah.
have to get yourself there. And it doesn't take that much time. That's the good news.
Yeah,
Give
that's
me one
right.
minute. Give me 1 minute. I'll get you there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I've done some of your things online. I remember there was this one you did where there was like all these squats or something, and you were like squatting in different ways, and I just like my legs were burning. Like I'm like, and you're still going, and I'm like, oh my God.
Love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard. It was challenging, but it felt good afterwards. So I think that's important. Yeah. Thank you so much. I guess we're going to start to wrap up, but is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today, maybe about the work you do or people that you work with, and how people can work with you, perhaps, that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I just still say that if there's some part of you that thinks that you need to wait till, a next lifetime, or something like that, to move fluidly or smoothly, sensually, I urge you to reconsider that. And if it's something that you have kind of leaned towards and then leaned away from, uh, it's available. It's available to all of us, especially if we just slow down. Just moving for, I'll say, a song, slowly, simple. It could be making a circle with your head. And when I say slow, I need to say it probably three more times, and even slower than you're thinking, even slower than you're thinking. And it is a teacher. So you don't need really another person outside guiding you. If you can get yourself to slow down, you're going to get to learn so much about your body and how you move, and what it's like to be in the moment with your movement. So that's a final nudge towards doing something outside of the prescriptive, or outside of what you might normally define as your exercise or routine. Just to do something, one thing, really slowly for one song. And yeah, yeah. So pick a thing. Let well, I was gonna say, let's name a couple things. So I said really slowly drawing a circle with, at the top of your head, circling your neck. It could be um, going from sitting to laying down on the floor and coming back up to sitting. But I mean, really, really slowly, where you get to notice how you're moving, and all of the ways that you might be holding tension or gripping your body in a way that aren't really needed. It could even be something that, maybe if you have a yoga practice, do something you often do, like a sun salutation, but at 1/10 of the speed, and see how that changes things. Do it in 1/10 of the speed in relationship to a song, with your whole body, feeling it from the way your feet interact with the ground, at the tips of your fingers, breathing with the music. And you're gonna start to see that to feel like you're going into this space of really embodied, fluid, or even dance movement doesn't require anything other than what you can already do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. I love that. I'm going to try that maybe. I've got a workshop coming up this weekend. I might try and do some slow, throw in some
Yeah, you can make
slow.
speed games. You know,
Yeah.
if you're doing it alone, you could, or with somebody else, you can create call outs of to different tempos of speed. It could be a scale where 0 is actually freezing and 5 is, frantic speed, or 10, choose your scale of how you do it. But just playing with tempo is so fun. And you can never be too advanced or too beginner to play with the speed of the movement.
Yeah.
So love that.
Thank you.
So
Thank
to
you.
find me, well, you're welcome. I'm pretty findable. If you type the word Marlo and flow, you will definitely find me. Um, I do some drop-in workshops these days, which are a nice way to just come do one thing. You can find those through my website or through Instagram.
And I'll put the
And
links in the show
yeah,
notes of this episode as well, so people can find you there.
yeah, super. And I'm always exploring new ideas for what I want to offer the world. But I do know in January I will have a couple floor and fluidity based sessions that are really geared towards people that have not worked with me before. So that might be of particular interest. Yet the name is yet to be released. But if you're curious about this silky smooth slow movement thing, I will have some opportunities for that coming soon.
Excellent. And that will be online or in person, more
Yeah,
likely.
online, everything, really. Yeah.
Lovely. Love it. Finally, last question. As we're
Yeah.
in the well-being room, and you've covered a lot, but apart from what we've already discussed, and maybe you can add, what is one other thing that has improved your own well-being and helps you get more out of life?
Besides moving,
Yeah, besides
right?
moving.
Besides moving. Besides moving. Mm, mm. I love improv comedy.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Just the practices from improv comedy, which is, if you're unfamiliar with it, a you could say a theatrical practice that tends to be funny. The pressure of comedy is a little high, but it tends to be funny as somebody might ask you a question and your job is to be in your yes to it. So if I suddenly address you, Leah, is like, "Hey, Janet, did you bring my cake today?" There's something inside of you saying, "I'm not Janet and I don't have a cake," but you have to immediately become Janet and have the cake and give back to me what I gave to you. And that is such a really powerful reframing. So if you know how to do that, you're like, "I'm having a bad day because da, 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 da." You could be like, "This is an interesting day because." So I find that improv comedy really allows you to see a situation from multiple perspectives and to go go with the absurdity, to play with the absurdity, and to really dance with something that on first look you didn't want, but it turns out that it might actually be kind of fun. So I love that. There are classes online. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for sharing that. I have done some theatre sports classes in the past, and yeah, have get lots of laughs out of that. It can be quite confronting and scary, but it's like once you just get into it, it's like, oh yeah. Yeah, I love how you frame that into a way, how you can actually then use that to maybe approach things differently just on a day-to-day basis as well. Mm.
yeah, yeah. You see the scenes of your life in different possible ways, which can be very freeing and again improve your well-being because you might not take a bummer day quite so seriously.
Yeah,
You can laugh at it sooner. You can laugh at it today rather than a month from now. you know?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you so much, Marlo. It's been an
You're so
absolute
welcome.
delight and pleasure to have you in the Wellbeing Room today. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to staying in touch and yeah, keep on doing what you're doing. It's bringing a lot of joy and energy into the world. So thank you so much for being you.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.